Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this Premier buried a BDO audit of Atira that was already underway when he didn't like the results. It was covered up and it was cancelled. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the Premier ignored the warning signs of financial mismanagement, and he went much further and actually tripled the funding for Atira. It happened on his watch. No other housing provider experienced such a massive increase in funding under this Premier. So why did the Premier choose to triple funding for Atira despite numerous red flags, warnings, and even clear evidence of financial and organizational mismanagement?
Premier.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, to the member for the question. The BDO report that the member refers to was initiated under the previous administration and covered their time in government. Now, I've been accused of a number of things in this House, but covering up mismanagement that took place under the watch of the previous government is not one of them. That's a new one. Within 120 days, Honourable Speaker, of being sworn in as Housing Minister, I directed staff to undertake a review of BC Housing that led to the report that was released today. Spoke to it in the House today. Happy to take questions from members on that issue.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to remind the Premier that it was the BC Liberals that instigated the BDO audit of Atira in 2017, and the Premier and the NDP cancelled it, covered it up, and then tripled Atira's funding. So after 6 years and 2 terms of this NDP government, housing and homelessness have never been worse, as we all know. Nowhere is it more evident than in this report released today, explosive and scandalous mismanagement of BC housing. But at every turn, Mr. Speaker, this Premier has sought to avoid accountability and in fact conceal his disastrous record overseeing BC housing. The report highlights that financial reviews, again of Atira, were stalled after 2020, right when this Premier was the Housing Minister. And during that time, again, tripled the funding of Atira. So, Mr. Speaker, when will this Premier acknowledge his direct responsibility and his direct accountability for the mess that happened under his watch at BC Housing?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. The member correctly notes that the BDO report, as I understand it, commissioned by the BC Liberal government into activity that took place under their watch as government. And I understand the members accusing me of burying that information about what happened while the BC Liberals were in government. Well, when we had the ICBC report about the BC Liberals' time in government, we released it. When we had the money laundering report about the BC Liberals' time in government, we released it.
Please continue.
And with respect, as soon as there was an indication when I was Housing Minister that there was an issue, I reached out to my colleague, the then Minister of Finance, to ask the Comptroller General to initiate a forensic investigation of BC Housing. And I share the member's concern about the spike in funding at Atira during the pandemic. I do not, and did not, as Housing Minister, direct funding to any particular organization. Those were recommendations that came to government from BC Housing. And the issue in this report that we released today is that those recommendations were tainted by the fact that the CEO was interfering in a way that he shouldn't have by circumventing the conflict of interest guidelines. Now, that is a serious issue. I agree with the member about that. And to that end, for the first time in 30 years, this government has released fully the report of the forensic investigator so that this House, on both sides and the public, can see what was happening, and so that they know that we're taking action on this.